What is a veteran, if someone should ask? A person who serves now or deep through the past. 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, Cold War veterans and those in the Gulf, Iraq and Afghanistan, and those who served here on post ports and bases, or not very near.
Jerry, I just wanted to point out that you're wearing a pin.
Oh, I'm wearing a pin that has my father's photograph in it. We had this made back in 2005. I led a group of war orphans, Gold Star King, to the Netherlands to our dad's graves, and we decided to make these up and wear them. And many of us duplicated them and gave each one of our adopters a photograph too. So I notice when I go over there on Memorial Day, I see more and more Dutch wearing a photograph of the soldier that they adopted. So I try to wear it on special occasions to keep Dad with me.
On the Gold Star flags, interesting, I have given out, we do have the Gold Star flags, the American Legion provides them for free. I have given out, probably in the past 10 years, I have given out 5. Not necessarily to our members, but to family members who may live. But I've given out a couple of dozen of the Blue Star flags. And a Blue Star flag can have 1, 2, or even 3 stars in it, depending on how many family members. So if there's anybody interested, and you hang these in your window.
Yep.
So if there's anybody that's interested in getting a Blue Star flag, or unfortunately a Gold Star flag, they can call me at 603-642-7257, and I can provide them with those flags to hang in their windows.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
I just recall a movie, and it's still around, about the Sullivan Brothers. Remember them? And I remember seeing the flag from the Sullivan Brothers, which is 5 gold stars. So they add gold stars as well, you know. Very nice thing.
For those who perhaps are not aware of who the Sullivan brothers were, they all served on the same ship and died on the same ship, and that is why they changed the rules, as I recall, so that not all of the family members would be serving in the same place at the same time.
Right.
Truly a terrible, terrible tragedy, but they served with honor. What was it like, Rick, for you coming back, or you were already in the States during the Vietnam era, but I was in high school and middle school during that period of time, and I can remember many of the soldiers coming back and were not treated particularly well. Did you find that?
I was fortunate. I didn't experience that, but I had very close friends who did. It was a very unpopular war, of course, and of course I was still in the service when I came back. I served a year here, then was a year in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive, which 68-69, which is a very busy time, to say the least, in Vietnam. And then I served another 9 months, and I got an early out to teach, but I served in Fort Bragg. And I didn't experience that, but I know a lot of people who did, who were spit on and you know, and this kind of thing. I remember once I was in New York and City for a while, and I had, the only clothes I had was my military uniform, and somebody said, and I was visiting a friend that happened to be in Greenwich Village, and they said, "Are you serious? Did you get through Greenwich Village, you know, unscathed?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, it's a very dangerous thing to do down here." But I think, you know, I didn't really worry about that too much. I think a lot of people, there were a lot of politics going on here in this country, and really people, they were very removed from the reality of some of the things that were going on, and so you have to kind of not forgive it exactly, but you have to put it in a certain perspective. looking back on it now, of course, hindsight is 20/20, you know, and you feel differently about things. But that one of the things I wanted to mention about the difference between the military now is we don't have the draft. You know, during World War II, everybody was involved in almost on a day-to-day basis, and also even during the Vietnam, we had the draft. We had many hundreds of thousands more were involved. Now, there's a sort of disconnect for a lot of people sometimes, that they're not, unless they really know somebody that's a soldier or somebody who's away, they don't really, if you don't watch the news at night, you don't really see it. It's a relatively small amount of professional people, which is one of the reasons, I think, because they have so many tours, is why they're having so many problems. And so I think it's very important that you see people in the nation, I sense that they want to be involved. There's a lot of participation. Even in our Memorial Day exercises in Merrimac, there's quite a good crowd now that come to that. And I can remember when it was, you know, the attendance was down a little bit, but it seems to be coming back. That's my impression. And I think it's because people know perhaps some people, or they want to get involved in some way, to feel as though the nation is involved instead of just this few that go off, and it's kind of hard. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that this business about talking about your service, and my father and I, when I came back from Vietnam, my father and I did not talk about it. He didn't talk much about what he did in World War II. He worked with aviation, naval aviation. We talked about it some over the years, but there was a kind of a unspoken code, I guess, that he knew a lot of the stuff that I mean, when you're in the military, you know some of the same things. Everybody knows. You don't have to talk about it a lot. And for a long time, I didn't want to talk about it. I was very uncomfortable about it. As you said, we didn't come back to heroes' parades or anything like that. It was a different atmosphere here. But I just, it took a long time for my father and I to talk about some of those things and to put it into perspective. And it's something that I think I deal with today. But I think having been in the service, you understand what the people are going through right now. And you not that we're there on the ground, I don't know what it's like in Kabul, but I can imagine what they go through and what they think about. And they do have, one big thing they do have now is the connection with computers and phones that we didn't have. I remember once I arranged to have a phone call to my mother, and it was relayed through people on the West Coast with radios. And as I started to talk to my mother, we had an air attack down on the river where I was in Mito, Dong Tam, actually, based with the 9th Division. And there was machine gun fire and bombs going off. And I said to my mother, I said, no, they're just testing. Don't worry about it. It's fine, you know. And meanwhile, I'm running to the bunker, you know.
That's good.
Yeah. And so you know, I said, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. You know, that's the end of that. We're not going to have any more phone calls. I remember when I was at a show once, and Bob Hope was on stage, and there was an air attack down the river, and he had his golf club. You know, he always used to appear with a golf club, and he said, "What the hell is that?" And all of a sudden, you know, they wanted to, cut. You know, you saw the Bob Hope diving for the bunker, but actually, it was an interesting experience. But I determined that I was not going to call anymore from home.
Yeah. I think you hit upon something when you say people don't talk about their experiences for a variety of reasons. Sometimes when they come back, it's perhaps too painful, or they just want to move beyond it. And get on with their lives. I think that was the theme that I heard a lot. My father-in-law, who served in the Navy, he never spoke about his experience until just before he passed away. And kind of in passing, one of his grandchildren asked him a question, and that's where we learned the most, from the grandchildren asking the questions. So sometimes it takes the next generation to bring out something that is. It was important for the kids to learn about. He went in at the age of 15, and when we look at our children today, 15, I can't even imagine a young man or a young woman at the age of 15 facing the kinds of things that they faced. And it was very common during World War II to have young men sign up. We are very lucky and fortunate that it's not quite like that now, but as I said, it was just amazing to me to hear his stories. Another thing that comes to mind is that we haven't really talked about how it was like for your family when you came back. Were there any kind of issues or things, changes that you found because you were away and your life has done one thing and you come back and you have to adjust? What was that like? Did you have any
I had no
adjustments
problems
because you were in the...
whatsoever. There was no war or fighting on when
Yeah.
I was over there.
Yeah.
I saw plenty of remains of World War II over there, but there was nothing in my, when I came home. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of problems. I did have, the only problem I had was kind of a comical thing, actually. When I got out of the Army, 9 days later, I started teaching 7th grade at Pentucket.
I don't know which is worse.
And I had a very colorful vocabulary, which had to be thoroughly vetted and gotten rid of. The way I would tell them to be quiet and sit down had to be revamped. The military vocabulary can be quite colorful, which I learned from drill instructors, by the way. And by the way, drill instructors, I had a great respect for them because in a way they kept us alive, I'll tell you that right now, some of that training, but it was useful in teaching too. But I had to tone down the vocabulary, and that was kind of that was a big problem.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I was very lucky. My parents were supportive, and I didn't have really didn't have problems.
That's good.
Did you have to threaten the kids?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm down, right? Well, I'm a little bit off the subject, I guess, but let's see. My two younger brothers, I'm going to miss part of the main question. They joined the Navy, and they were, I was thinking of the 5 Sullivan brothers together, and one was stationed on the battleship Iowa, my youngest brother, and when my other brother, this was all during the Korean conflict, and when he found out my second youngest brother, Buck, Don was on the battleship Iowa, and Buck was on the destroyer Merrimac 731, and so Don asked for a transfer to the destroyer Maddox, and he got it. So they were both on the Maddox together during the conflict, and they were actually got a medal. They went up to Korean Strait there, and the ship was awarded a medal because they were shooting back and forth going up there. My oldest brother was in intelligence too in Germany, and so he had a bounty on his head, and so you could get him back, dead or alive, drag him back, and so there was a lot of things that they
I can't imagine a bounty on your head.
Yeah. So I thought whether it was by the Russians or the Germans, and later on, that had to mix it era. So they kind of blend in things, a lot of things they did. It was tough for them, and we were worried about them and so forth that you mentioned earlier, and concerned, and Dad was real worried, but.
Jerry, you didn't have the same thing, but
Yeah,
I do
I do
know.
remember, though, uncles that came back very thin, and my grandmother would have Sunday dinner, fun. And I think that did not happen during the war, that happened after the war. That Sunday dinners came back into popularity, because we lived with my grandparents, so I would hear her during the week planning the Sunday dinner, because she had to fatten Bill up, or she had to fatten Joe up, because they came home so thin. And I think the difference was probably food, the different kinds of food that were available, that weren't available during the war.
Well, and if you look at the cookbooks from World War II, they actually, I collect cookbooks, and they have a number of war cookbooks for people to be able to use things.
Stretch.
Yeah,
It was
stretch
the stretch
things.
word.
And so casseroles came into being.
Right.
And things of that nature. And then coming back from World War II, people had been to places like Italy and wanted to have Italian food, and had been to France and wanted some of that French food. So some of our appetite challenges occurred after World War II. But I think that it is a very interesting thing when you stop and think about how the wars have changed who we are, even in this country, from the experiences of the travel and seeing whether it was during the Cold War or during the Vietnam War or any Guam after the World War II. You bring those experiences back with you, and that's why I was, looking at that and saying, how do you think it might have changed you from those experiences? Roger, I know you were not spending as much time, but you were training people to go over. Did you ever find people that you had trained and have them
what
come back
happened
to you?
is as a drill instructor, it's a 2-year tour of duty. So I was in the Marine Corps for 2 years before I went on the tour of duty, but you pretty much kept track of your recruits. Of course, we were in the Pacific, so that a lot of them came back to the military hospital in San Diego. And we would go down and visit, our recruits. And we would also, the families would come to town, and we were assigned to meet the families of coming to pick up their deceased veterans, deceased members. And I can remember one fellow that he got hit by a grenade, and it blew his ear off. And he had the sense to reach down and grab his ear and bring it back. And in a field hospital, not in a regular hospital, they sewed the ear back on. And I saw him in the Navy hospital, and you couldn't even tell. And that, today, and that was the first thing that they were doing with reattaching body parts back then. But now it's like, it happens every day. But there's a lot of Vietnam veterans you don't see, and you don't hear about them that have missing limbs and stuff like that. But as far as coming home, one of the interesting things, I can remember my brother was in for 2 years before I went in, and he come home, and he was so much more mature than when he left. I said, wow, this is my brother, he'd come in, he'd be walking tall and everything like that, and when he left, he was such a jerk, I said, wow, I want to be like my brother,
Not the jerk part.
No. I don't know how, but it was, I don't know if you guys, it was a 48-hour thing when you came home. We usually came home on like 10 days of leave, and I came back twice on 10 days of leave. And, I went down to my grandmother's and grandfather's, and they made me pancakes and everything like that. Well, into 72 hours, are you going to take the trash out? It's over. It was over, I'm home, I'm safe, there's nothing wrong. I got to go back in 7 days. So, it was kind of like, the old routine before we left. You're going to take the trash out. But like Rick said, you had to be very careful of how you talked. Because in the Marine Corps, when you asked for the salt, it was a rude language that you would ask for it. And if they didn't pass it right away, you would get even ruder. So you had to be very careful about your talking was one of the biggest things I can remember.
I do recall one thing that I'd almost forgotten. I was in Vietnam. I was wounded, unfortunately not too badly, by a mortar round coming in, and there's a certain sound when a mortar comes in that's not like an explosion in a movie. It's kind of a vroom. There's a kind of a sound that's muffled. And I was in front of the drugstore. The reason I thought of it was because I was sitting here next to Leo. I was in front of the drugstore, and a car went by and backfired or something and made that noise. And the next thing I knew, I was straight on the sidewalk in front of his store on my stomach. Never even thought about it. It just bam. I just got down like that. And I looked around, I thought, my God, what's somebody going to think? I pretended I tripped or something. But that's the only time that ever happened. But when I hear of people now from coming back from the Middle East with these conditions that they can't, I had a friend who could never sleep in a bed when he got back from Vietnam. He always used to sleep on the floor on a blow-up mattress. He just couldn't do that.
My college roommate's husband was in Vietnam, and she said when Doug came home, he had been there 18 months, something, endless time, and seen a lot of action. She said the only thing that it took forever for him to get over was he'd get up in the morning and pick up his slippers and shake them out, so there was no scorpions in them or
Snakes.
snakes or
Yeah.
anything. And she
Yeah.
said it went on for about a year before he finally realized he didn't have to do that anymore. It was just automatic. Yeah. And the amount of time in the shower. She said it was like he'd be in and be out. And she said before, he'd be in the shower for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, right? She said it was wonderful. So that was a good side of it coming home. Yeah.
You weren't the only one who ended up on the sidewalk in front of my store.
Oh, you did too, Lou?
Yeah, well.
Well, see, what the young lady is saying, it's kind of funny when, for us now, in a way, because we don't really talk about our military times because it's a proud thing that we did, but then there are amusing times. An amusing situation for me is the idea that I can sleep through now just about anything. My wife, on the other hand, hears a little sound and she's awake. But mine goes back to my Navy days. I'm on board ship, the ship is in dry dock, and here on the outside of my sleeping area, they're chipping away. Brrr, brrr. And you either sleep through this or you're awake all night long. Well, even though the ship is in dry dock, you still have duties come 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier than that. That means you need to get the rest. So after a while, your being develops so that these sounds don't bother you anymore. They're just part of like hearing a cricket or hearing a bird fly, and you don't pay that much attention to it. Today, it amuses me to think I can sleep through sounds that are going on outside. My wife will go, "What was that? Did you hear that? Somebody's out there. What's that sound? I think I just heard a stick crack." And I get amused, and she goes, you and your brother think this is funny, don't you? You guys really think this is a riot. Because Roger, being in the Marine Corps, also had all kinds of sounds going off with the gun firing and everything. The one thing that Roger really made me jealous of, here I am in the Navy. I'm jumping off the ship. We would pull in and be able to go swimming and stuff like this. The captain said, okay, we've got the guns up here watching for any sharks or anything. You guys can go in swimming. But Roger goes and trains for underwater diving. he actually gets the license and everything, yet he's in the Marine Corps, I'm in the Navy, and I'm the one that should be getting this swimming technique, not Roger. So when we get out, Roger's got the special swim fins, the special goggles, he's got the air tanks, and I almost think he's becoming part of Jacques Cousteau's underwater adventures. But I have to say, today, the closest friend and person I have is my brother. The one person I can always depend on is my brother. You do meet people over the years that you are friends with and you have relationships with. Fortunately for me, I have my brother. True, when we were kids, you'd fight and argue and things weren't great. But it's like when you finally get together and say, we are a family, we're together. And every once in a while, I think, and even my wife will say, you know, I think some of these people think you and your brother are married. Because they see us together so much. But that's because I enjoy his company, I enjoy his stories, and I enjoy working with him. And the thing is that a lot of people don't understand is that Roger is the cemetery caretaker for the state of Kingston, New Hampshire.
Town, yeah.
Okay.
And I think the military does that to you. It makes you understand that once you have a friendship or some type of, even a family relationship, it makes you bond more, yeah.
Brothers.
Brothers, right. Brothers in arms, they call
Well,
it,
that
right?
band of
Yeah,
brothers
like
that
the
they say,
band of
it's
brothers.
real. Those friends
Yeah.
keep you alive.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found back in 1990, or 1998, I'm sorry, was an organization, a national organization for those of us who lost fathers in World War II. And through the course of these years, I've learned that there's levels, we come together, like Vietnam vets can come together and there's just something. And same with World War II vets or Korean vets. War orphans come together and there's this other level of understanding, okay? But it goes deeper because there's those who have fathers buried in Epinal. There's those who have fathers buried in Holland. It's a deeper and a closer relationship because of that commonality. There's also a group whose fathers are missing in action, which I can't even imagine what that must be like. There's those that have fathers that were missing in action that they helped find and bring home. I know 3 of these people.
Wow.
So when you say this about military service and even those of us who lived with the aftermath of a war, there are levels of understanding that come when you come together as a group where you really don't have to talk. You don't have to talk about the experience because it's already there and it's open and people understand that. Those of us who didn't talk about our fathers, which almost all of us didn't, seemed to talk as we got into our 50s and 60s because our mothers started passing away. And so it became a safer subject because there was this look. You got it too. I'm sure you did. Somebody would say, oh, you're in Vietnam. And you said, yes, I was. And then there's a look. And they don't want to talk about it to you. We had that growing up with our mothers. There was a painful look in her eyes, so you didn't go there. So now we have a whole group of war orphans who are talking all the time about the experience of being there. And I think what we're hearing today is people who are comfortable enough now, time has passed, where you can now really talk about those experiences and educate the youth of today on what it was like to be in a war and come home after a war. I think of people who were in the Korean War that came home to television.
I had an interesting
Can you
thing.
imagine?
I had an interesting thing happen in Germany when I was there in 1982, 83. I had a Fulbright to teach. And I was on a park bench, and I had just come from the States, and I was still reading a Time magazine that I hadn't finished, and I guess my clothes looked kind of American. And some man said to me, Are you a foreigner? Are you an American? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, he said, I've never met an American personally, but he said, I want to thank you for something. And I said, oh. And he said, I want to thank you for saving us from ourselves in World War II. I don't know how old he thought I was. But I was 44, I was born, but I thought that was an astonishing thing.
Yes.
He said, the only thing is, because this was before Germany was reunited, he said, the only thing is, I wish when you'd come a little further east. He said, you should have gone right to the border of Russia. But I thought that was kind of interesting, and
Very
I've also had a chance to see German military cemeteries too. There's that whole other side of it that a lot of
Right.
Americans never see.
Right.
The real tragedy of war, I think.
One of the things that I had an opportunity in 1969 to go to the Netherlands, and one of the things that we did while we were there was go to Margraten. And it was also the time that President Eisenhower passed away, and the entire country went into mourning. And to be an American in that country at that time, they just were amazing. We were just high school students, seniors, and they just wanted us to know what a special person he was, that they really honored what he had done to liberate them. And when I met Jerry and discovered that her father was buried in Margraten, and she told me where he was, I was dumbfounded because I had actually been to his gravesite and knew exactly where it was. So the connection there, and I don't have anyone buried over there, but every single one of us that were there, and we, as I said, we were teenagers, there wasn't a dry eye there. It was an amazing experience. So if you do travel overseas, take the opportunity to go to these graves and look at them and remember them. We don't want to forget them. And just as we honor and thank all of you for your service, whether it was in peacetime or Cold War or during the war, we'd like to remember you at this time and thank you as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.